Hey guys, what's up? It's Umbruhh here, and I am finally back. I am so sorry for the lack of consistent uploading. I have been dealing with things happening in my life, and I've been suffering from a bit of burnout lately, so I haven't been consistent with uploads as much as I would have liked, or with writing, so I do apologize for that. But I am making an effort to work on more videos and more streams and more stories, but for now, I've been wanting to do this for a while now. I want to talk about my first impressions of Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. So my first impressions, I have a lot to talk about. So my impressions will be split into two videos. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the story, the characters in Endwalker, and some of the general story mechanics. So I think this goes without saying, there will be spoilers for Endwalker, so if you still haven't done the MSQ yet, I would avoid clicking off this video. So, for those of you who have seen it, or just don't care about spoilers, or you skip cutscenes, I don't think you should, but, I mean, I don't judge if you skip cutscenes, but if you do, then sit back, relax, and enjoy. So, from what I've been able to play of Endwalker, well, barely. So, I want to talk first about the story, one of Endwalker's highlighting aspects, which is supposed to be the final chapter of the Hydaelyn and Zodiark saga. So, overall, I really liked Endwalker's story. It was engaging, it was emotional, it was satisfying, and most importantly, it was fun. Okay, well, maybe not always, but overall, I really liked the story of Endwalker. And I gotta say, a lot of the predictions that I had about Endwalker and where the story was gonna go, honestly, I was wrong for a lot of them, and let's just say I'm glad I was, because this expansion completely blew my expectations out of the water for the best. For example, I thought the towers being put up by Fandaniel and the Telophoroi were part of the final days, and so you can imagine my reaction when they were just red herrings and just a prelude for what we had yet to experience. And seriously, the blasphemies were fucking horrifying, and I thought nothing could get scarier than the Sin Eaters. And considering how they misled us with Anima and the Magus Sisters being set up as the trials for this X-Pact, I can imagine that most of us were pleasantly surprised that we got to fight both Hydaelyn and Zodiark this expansion, and none of us were expecting to see Magni get rejected as hard as he did again. Jeez, that part was funny. And just like with Shadowbringers, I really like how this expansion wasn't afraid to get dark, and dare I say, it got more dark than Shadowbringers at times. Like, from the entirety of the story in Garlemald, especially with the two sisters running away from their saviors and towards their death in the snow, or Quintus killing himself rather than talk to Lucia, although, to be fair, he kinda deserved it. Speaking of things about to get really fucked up, the second visit to Thavnair where the final days arrive for real and the blasphemies attack and ravage the citizens. The sky is on fire, people are getting devoured alive and turned into those monstrosities left and right. And that part in Venispati where the elephant mother and her kids... We don't need to talk about that. And of course the mother, the other mother, and the baby. Yeah, I have nightmares from this part, and just the whole concept of the blasphemies in general is just horrifying. Like, unlike Sin Eaters, where you have to be killed by one of them or exposed by a lot of light in order to become a Sin Eater, what's truly scary about the blasphemies is how those things are just born from intense emotions like anger, fear, despair. So, let's say you were in Thavnair or just anywhere Naor's in, you felt those emotions, you would just get turned into one of those things and the whole soul is destroyed. And I just think that's what makes this scenario truly scary, is that even if the threat isn't around you, you can still suffer. Now, going back to the story, as much as I did like Endwalker's story, in my opinion, I still like Shadowbringers and even Heavensward more. So let's talk about some of the issues I had with the story. So mainly for me, it's the pacing. So you get some really awesome storylines that put you into the action, like Thavnair, Garlemald, the fight with Zodiark, the climax of Elpis, and Ultima Thule. And there are some moments where just everything slows down to a grinding halt and kind of subtracts away from the task at hand, like most of Mare Lamentorum with the Loporrits after killing Zodiark, the second visit to Labyrinthos, especially with that fucking Sage Council quest. I don't want to play Guess Who when I'm trying to save the world, and I'm ready for the pitchforks with this opinion, most of Elpis. Now, while I do realize that most of these parts are very crucial to the story, I feel like it really slows down the pacing. Like, think about it. You're in one zone rescuing refugees and innocent people while fighting against the monstrosities of the final days, and the next thing you know, you're running around the moon with the personas of the 7 dwarfs, or running around a floating island talking to scientists, as pretty as the zone may be. Although the characters in Elpis really redeem it for me, especially Emmett, Selk, and Venat. God, I fucking love Venat. And plus, we still don't know what Ilsabard looks like on a fucking map! God, I'm dropping so many F-bombs this video. I really hope this video doesn't get taken down. And I noticed that the narrative themes of this expansion are not that much different from Shadowbringers, namely how both expansions touch on the themes of hope, despair, nihilism, and feature an apocalypse scenario, although Endwalker seems to double down more on the nihilism aspects, especially with all 3 of the main villains, Xenos, Fandaniel, and Medion, who are all nihilists, funny enough, although in different ways. Although not to say that it was bad by any means, I rather liked it honestly, especially when the Scions use their own experiences, especially in the first, to serve as a foil to said nihilism. And honestly, I did really like Endwalker, but I did have a lot of, I guess, some gripes with the story, so I would have to say that Endwalker would be my 3rd favorite expansion story-wise. Now, before you try to cut off my... Now, before you get your pitchforks, I'm not saying that Endwalker is my 3rd favorite expansion, period. Just the story. I will get into how I would rank it as my favorite expansion later on. But now, I want to talk about the characters. Now, on another note, I really like the way that certain characters were developed this expansion, particularly Alphanode, Grahatia, Urianger, and Xenos. Alphanode has come such a long way from being this annoying little boy in A Realm Reborn and such a well-rounded character who's loyal, mature, and willing to do whatever it takes to fight the final days. And Graha, I mean, he already became one of my favorite characters in Shadowbringers as the Crystal Exarch, and it was awesome to see that he still had a major role in this expansion and wasn't just moved to the sidelines like I was expecting. I like how he has his funny moments too, like when he was enjoying that cheeseburger. God, that looks good too. And how he still is a badass in a lot of moments, like how his experiences in the first influenced his character, especially seeing his Exarch persona come out in Thavner when dealing with the final days while trying to protect the citizens of Radzat-Han, or in Garlemald, where he's like, I won't lose them! Not a one! Just, Graha is a great character. And now, Urianger. It was really nice to see Urianger get fleshed out more this expansion, since before he's never really been one of the main Scions until 3.4 and Shadowbringers, and even then he was still just this mysterious man who talks like a Shakespeare character. But I really like that this arc of his really touched up on his remorse and grief over Mundrida's death, and how he reconnected with her parents. It really helped make his character feel far more human, give him that sense of closure that I've been wanting to see happen to him for a while. And now we get to talk about one of the most controversial characters of Final Fantasy XIV, Lys. No, I'm just kidding, at least for now. Xenos. Now, unlike most people who disliked Xenos for being bland or one-dimensional, I actually always liked Xenos, and I liked how he was the dark reflection of our character, and how he's written as this character who has never known satisfaction in his life, especially if you read his short story. He's never reached his limits, but his battle with the Warrior of Light changed that, and for once in his life, he knew a sliver of happiness, and he's been trying to recapture that feeling ever since, kind of like an addict trying to recapture that first high. And the final battle with him was arguably one of my favorite moments of this expansion. And how you both just gave it your all and you just straight up dropped your weapons and proceeded to beat the shit out of each other with your bare hands. It was anime as fuck. And also, if you picked any other option, then that I cannot deny. What is wrong with you? Although there were some other characters that stood out too, but not in a good way, and I think the one that comes to mind the most is Fandaniel, more specifically Amon. Now, unlike Fandaniel's unsundered counterpart Hermes, who I felt had a good amount of depth to his character, and it was easy to understand his actions, Fandaniel's motivations in Shadowbringers and Endwalker are laughably bad. Now, don't get me wrong, I do find him entertaining as a villain to an extent, especially with how fucking wacky and eccentric he is. And I probably gained a six-pack from laughing when he played dress up in the quest where Xenos goes inside. Yeah, I mean, Xenos goes inside your body and takes control. God, that still sounds lewd. However, and when he dresses up as a Maelstrom soldier and then a butler was hilarious. But aside from that, I did find him pretty annoying at times and his motivations really stupid. Now, to offer more explanation for this, before the first dungeon you learn that he is Amon, who is one of the bosses from Circus Tower. Amon was an Allegan scientist and later emperor who revived Zand. However, Zand's resurrection made him nihilistic and he formed a pact with the Cloud of Darkness and then tried to destroy the world. And then Emmett Selk appeared and recruited him into the Ascians to become Fandaniel, and then he later adopted Zand's nihilistic view of the world. I did find it a bit disappointing that Fandaniel's nihilism isn't even really his own, he's just parroting what his former emperor said. And then when he pulls a sudden 180 when you beat his ass in the afterlife in the level 89 dungeon, and he starts regretting his actions. Although as much as I hate Asahi, more than Fandaniel, it was funny to see him come out of nowhere and smack the bitch out of him. And overall, while I did find him entertaining, I feel like the Amon half of Fandaniel could have been written a lot better. And on another note, I know Fandaniel was a character you were supposed to hate, for how despicable his actions were and how he's wearing the face of Doma's most punchable douchebag. But one thing I think the devs could have done is, they missed a good opportunity to have us hate him more, is if he didn't possess Asahi's body, at least not at first, but Harshafon's body instead. That would have made him easily one of the most despicable Final Fantasy XIV characters, desecrating the corpse of Final Fantasy XIV's most beloved character and just make the hatred that the Warrior of Light has against him even stronger. And now I want to talk about some of the side things, so the story mechanics of Endwalker. So one of the new features that I love about Endwalker is how they've improved interactions with NPCs. Like during quests, for example, you could have like Grahatia or Alphanode accompanying you while you go check something out in Sharlayan, or there will be another quest where you have to go follow a girl in Garlemald without being seen. It really adds a lot more immersion to the player and is a better experience than having an NPC just say something like, "Oh, come with me to the markets," and then they disappear from sight, forcing you to meet them there and act like you just walked with them. And additionally, I am really glad to see the trust system return in Endwalker, which I personally think is the definitive way to experience dungeons for the first time, not just story-wise and not just for the NPC dialogue, but the NPCs teach you a lot of the dungeon's mechanics, unlike Duty Finder, Aether, and oh, sorry, I don't know why I said that. However, a lot of the issues I had with Trust Dungeons and Shadowbringers still persist in Endwalker. Like, for example, most of the time, Trust party members will almost never use their AoEs aside from Y'shtola, which makes dealing with mobs take way much longer than it needs to. And then, on another more personal gripe, I kinda wish that you could keep the party members that only show up for one dungeon in the story, and then just use them in any dungeon you like. So, like, for example, Lena in Shadowbringers, or Emet-Sel, Kithlodeus, and Venat in Endwalker. And I wish you could use Estinian in Shadowbringers dungeons and Reen in Endwalker dungeons. And as for story concerns, I can understand it not making sense, but if you can use any of the scions like Thancred, Urianger, and Y'shtola in the first dungeon of Shadowbringers, Holminster Switch, which takes place before that any of them show up, or Reen in any of the last two dungeons of Shadowbringers which are in the source, I see no reason that you shouldn't be able to use the other Trust members that aren't around in the story at that time. But overall, I really liked Endwalker's story, but there were some issues with it, so overall, I would say it's my third favorite expansion, but that's all I have to talk about today. Endwalker is a great expansion, and I will be talking about what more I like about it in the next part of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this. Comment down below what are your thoughts on Endwalker so far, whether you liked the story or whether you didn't, and some of the other things about the expansion that you like so far. Stay tuned for part 2, subscribe for more videos, follow my socials, and I will see you guys later. You guys are the best. Umbruhh out.